Brilliant. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Climate Crisis Action Plan launch event. My name is Edith Gallius and I'll be acting as MC this evening, guiding you through the event and trying to keep us to time. Before I introduce the panel, I just want to take a few minutes to go through how this meeting will operate. Due to the fact it's a live event, we're not able to open the microphones up to everyone. Instead, we're asking you to post your comments and questions in the chat function. You'll find the chat box at the bottom right hand of your screen. These are all going to be moderated to ensure that there's no unsavoury content and the team will then publish them. This may mean that if there's a short delay between submission and appearance of questions, don't worry, we are looking at them and they are going to come through. When we get to the Q&A sections of the event, I'll be presenting the questions to the panel and reading them out. If we have a lot of questions coming in, what I might try and do is just collate some of those questions that are on similar themes so the panel can get to as many questions as possible in the time that we've got. Okay, now we've done the housekeeping. I hope that all makes sense and I would like to share the agenda so I can run through the speakers for this evening's event. So next slide, thank you. First of all, we're going to have Councillor Jas Athwell, the leader of the council, talking about the journey so far. He's going to open the event and talk about where we're going. Next, I am really pleased to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Shirley Rodriguez, the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, who is able to join us for the first part of the session, and we'll have a short Q&A for a few questions to the panel before Shirley needs to go to her following engagement. Then we're going to have Councillor Joe Blackman, the Cabinet Member for Civic Pride and Environment, who will provide an overview for the action plan, as well as providing some of the information about how you can get involved in your area. And finally, we're going to hear from Ruth Musgrave from Transition Town Ilford, talking about some of the local projects that are happening in our area. So I think that's enough from me, and I'm pleased to welcome Councillor Jas Athwell to formally open this event and launch the Climate Crisis Action Plan.
Thank you, Edith. I just want to have a sound check that you can hear me. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today for the launch of Redbridge Council's first ever Climate Change Action Plan. The fact is, we are already living through a climate emergency. Globally, as you can see, I think we're experiencing the effects of the climate change, the dangers it brings, whether that be extreme weather patterns, higher temperatures, or toxic air. The climate emergency is truly here. In Redbridge, we are committed to taking action to do our part to tackle the climate change and to make our borough a cleaner and greener place to live, work, and visit. We know it'll take time to involve difficult choices, but we are ambitious for the future of Redbridge. We know we need to take steps and guarantee that future for generations to come. Climate change is a global problem, but it's also a local problem and needs both global and local solutions. We're committed to working closely with our partners in the government and the GLA to do what we can to further the climate agenda and protect our planet. That's why we're excited to officially launch our Climate Action Plan. The launch is a great occasion to celebrate, but it's not the start of our journey. We have been working hard for many years to reduce our emissions and make Redbridge greener, but we know we still have a very long way to go, a very long way to go. First slide, please. Okay, so in June 2019, we unanimously passed a climate emergency declaration at full council, responding to the public concern and the extensive scientific evidence. We committed to working towards making Redbridge Council carbon neutral by 2030, carbon zero by 2050, and ensuring all council assets, existing and new, are as energy efficient as possible. In October 2019, we established a corporate panel to listen to residents, review best practice, and meet with local groups and national experts. The corporate panel presented its recommendations in November 2020. By combining this research, we developed the action plan that we're launching today. Whilst this work was ongoing, we didn't stand still. We carried on going. Instead, we pushed our agenda forward and delivered some of the fantastic successes that you're about to see. Next slide, please. Okay, so far in Redbridge, we've introduced electric vans. We purchased the first electric vehicles for the council fleet in 2021. These electric vehicles emit fewer greenhouse gases and air pollutants than petrol or diesel cars, even after taking into account their production and electricity generation to keep them running. We've been retrofitting homes. We secured 1.7 million worth of funding to support homeowners and landlords to help improve the energy efficiency of their homes through the installation of low carbon heating improvements. These improvements could help save up to £600 a year on energy bills and make homes warmer and more comfortable for people living in them, benefiting local people and our local environment. Additional funding has also been awarded to the council to begin retrofitting our own housing stock. And we've got the green energy tariff. Our council will be moving onto a green electricity tariff across the corporate estate from autumn 2021, reducing our carbon footprint and setting a good example for our residents and neighbours. Of course, we've got the electric vehicle charging points. We've installed 40 of these charging points across the borough to support local people to move towards electric vehicles and away from polluting petrol and diesel cars. Of course, we've had the wheelie bin rollout. We have completed that rollout, giving every household in Redbridge a brand new wheelie bin. So far, the rollout has resulted in an absolute fantastic, significant decrease in household waste and an increase in recycling, just what we wanted. And we're working on plans to keep encouraging local people to waste less and recycle more. As we go forward, we'll make sure that the climate change agenda is at the heart of everything this council does. Our priority is to protect our environment now and for generations to come, educating and supporting local people to join us in making green choices and transforming our practices so our pandemic recovery is also a green recovery. Thank you. And now what I would like to do is introduce you to our keynote speaker for today, who will give you a regional perspective. Shirley was appointed as the London Deputy Mayor for Environment in October 2016. So over to you, Shirley.
Thank you, Jazz. I'm just going to call up my speech. It just disappeared for a minute. Thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me to speak today about your fantastic work, the launch of your new climate action plan, and also how it aligns really closely with the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's priorities for London, and also how we can best work together to tackle the climate emergency. We're in a really unique situation, the year of COP26, but also COP15, the biodiversity conference, and we're just starting to emerge from the pandemic. So we have a great opportunity, I think, to work together in this decade of action to urgently address both how we get a green economic and social recovery, but also tackle the climate and ecological emergencies. Following his re-election in May, the Mayor Sadiq has been really clear that his second term is about delivery, and climate ambition is absolutely a central part of his manifesto and now the next 3 years. And he's reconfirmed his target for London to be net zero by 2030. And I'm really pleased to see your ambitions in Redbridge for the council to be carbon neutral by 2030 and producing zero carbon emissions by 2050. And in order to get London back on its feet following the pandemic, the Mayor is working, as you know, with London Council, so all of London boroughs. He co-chairs a London Recovery Board, which is settled on 9 key areas, missions, that we're going to focus on together to help the city's recovery. And one of those is called Green New Deal. And this is really about that green recovery and how we tackle improving our natural environment, but also tackle the impacts of climate change that we're seeing. Many of you will have seen or experienced the sort of flash flooding we saw over the last few days. And of course, Jazz, you mentioned the toxic air that we've been working on very hard over the last few years. And we want to do this by doubling the size of London's green economy, so creating green jobs, new green jobs for all Londoners. And we can do this. This is absolutely the right way to do it, because we know that these sorts of things will develop new jobs. These are the industries of not necessarily the future, but now. But we're also really clear that if you're doing this, we have to tackle social justice and economic inequality just as much as tackling the environmental emergencies. And we know that there are structural inequalities that have been long linked with environmental impacts. If you're less well off or from a Black and minority ethnic background, then you're more likely to live in an area with the worst air pollution. And many of the most vulnerable communities are most likely to have poor access to green spaces. And you know, many people have experienced that during the several lockdowns that we've been through. And your action plan is just like ours in that you rightly pointed out that we can't meet our ambitions for all of these issues, the emergencies or redressing inequalities, without taking individuals, businesses and communities with us. And whilst we can't do everything, the Mayor has set aside some funding, over £50 million worth of funding over the next few years, to support this mission being implemented. And we're going to be focusing on projects that address those areas and those communities that are most climate vulnerable, most deprived, and have been hardest hit by the pandemic. For example, last week, the Mayor announced £6 million worth of funding for new green projects through his Grow Back Greener Fund. And this is looking to fund communities to improve areas of poor access to green space and where they're susceptible to overheating or flash flooding. And all of these projects are aiming to support the Mayor's commitment that no Londoner should live more than 10 minutes walk from a green space. We're also working through the Green New Deal to support the Mayor's declaration of a retrofit revolution. And so it's absolutely fantastic to see how much your plan places as a priority the retrofitting of your housing. Homes and our workplaces are responsible for the bulk of the capital's emissions, and all of them, virtually all of them, are going to need some level of retrofitting over the next decade. I think you mentioned in your plan that, you know, near enough 80% of your existing housing in Redbridge is going to be in use at 2030. So we can't knock them down. It's very not particularly environmentally sustainable to do that. But how can we retrofit them, both for energy efficiency, but also helping tackle fuel poverty? In London, we have the 3rd worst fuel poverty level of any region in England. And, you know, when we talk about levelling up, we also mean levelling up within London. We've been working with government to make sure that we can access funding for London, and we've helped to secure £160 million worth of government funding for London's boroughs to help reduce carbon emissions and cut energy bills. And we've developed what we call an innovation partnership, which is a sort of scheme that helps make it easier for social landlords like Redbridge and UK building firms to come together and work together to really upgrade and retrofit homes in a way that is going to be necessary for us to meet our net zero carbon targets. You know, the deep retrofit, that sort of equivalent to the passive house standard that you have for new development. And that's going to mean jobs for people in retrofitting, not, you know, both in London and outside of London. So do look out for that. You know, we've already got 7 London social housing providers ready to start delivering. We've got a number of building companies that we're working with. So we really hope that Redbridge will join us and be part of that partnership. And we've also got a housing accelerator, which has got lots of good advice to help boroughs and others to really make a sort of the scale, the leap that we need to do to really retrofit all our homes that we're going to need to meet those net zero carbon targets. And one of the things that we've also done is created, partnered with an energy supplier to create London Power, which is the Mayor's energy company. And that gives, we work very hard to try and secure a really competitive deal, which has a triple lock in that it's always fair, always affordable. It's always going to be within the 10% of the cheapest. And you may know that some of the very cheap deals are a bit tease and squeeze, that so when you join them, they're really cheap, but then within a year they've massively increased. So it's worth looking out for that. And part of what they do is also work with housing associations and local authorities to offer that, to make that offer available to your tenants and other residents too. And of course it uses renewable energy, so it's good for the climate. And then air quality, this has been an absolute keynote part of Sadiq's work in London because of the massive impacts it has on people's health. It's responsible for the premature deaths of 4,000 people every year. But the work that we're doing, and including the ultra low emission zone expansion in October, out to but not including the north and south circular roads, will mean that most of London, 92% of London, will now will fall into legal limits for nitrogen dioxide. And we know, as I said, that this brings significant health benefits to all of London, so it's not just within that inner London area. And it is a social justice issue because we know the poorest communities will benefit because that exposure gap will reduce by something like 71%. We're just in the process of really ramping up our marketing and comms to make sure that everybody knows this is coming. We've been working on this for the last 5 years, but there's been lots of things that have grabbed other people's attention, not least the pandemic. So we're just reminding people. And of course, the Mayor has made some funding available, over £50 million worth, near enough £56 million worth of funding for vehicle scrappage to help particularly low income and disabled Londoners and businesses and charities to scrap their vans and cars and motorcycles that don't comply with the standards, so they're ready in time. And it's brilliant to see that people have been taking note, and we've got I think almost 80% of cars driving in the zone are already compliant. So do look out for those scrappage schemes as well. So I've just touched on that just a little bit. I haven't even talked about waste management or biodiversity, but we're doing lots and lots of things. So do have a look at our website for information as Londoners. We've got lots of funding out there for community groups, businesses. We're funding a lot of entrepreneurs to develop new circular economy products so that we avoid all those single-use plastics. Like I said, I've only touched a little bit on some of those issues, but I think what's brilliant is that we have a massively shared approach, setting really clear targets, clear directions, working with our communities together to bring us together and learning from our communities about what they want and where they want to go faster. And because of that, I think we really can truly tackle the climate emergency, send the signal to government, and not just our government, but all governments across the world, that this is what people want, because this will lead to better lives and better jobs. COP26 is just 4 months away, as is the expansion of ULEZ. And as I've said, we've got a unique opportunity to work together in that run up. So really looking forward to working with all of you at Redbridge, and really commend you for your fantastic action plan. Thank you again for having me, and I really look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you very much, Shirley, and thank you for your time joining us today. I can see that there's a whole host of questions that have already come in. Some are Redbridge specific and some a bit broader. So I'd like to just start by asking about the ultra low emission zone. There's a couple of questions that have come in about the fact that we're on the border of that. And how's the Mayor helping residents adapt to the ULEZ as it comes in?
So as I mentioned that because the way it works, people won't be driving exclusively within the zone. When we've seen this actually with the Central London ultra low emission zone, the impacts, the benefits from those people complying with the standards means the air quality benefits spread out across London, and that's why we believe when we expand this out to the north and south circulars, that practically all of London will then fall into legal limits for NO2. There are going to be hotspots, And those are areas that we're working very hard with TfL to identify, and then we'll do localized interventions. So that's what we're modeling at the moment and trying to understand is where those hotspots are, that's the remaining 8% of roads, and what can we do ourselves as TfL or working with local authorities. I mentioned the scrappage scheme, that's to help people prepare for their own vehicles. We've also got a low emission zone, which is targeting heavy goods vehicles, lorries, and they, that's been long standing, and that's the standards for that were, tightened early this year, very tough standards, because they are now meeting their standards, and something in the order of 90%, if not higher, of vehicles, those sorts of vehicles are meeting our standards. So again, bringing benefits from reduced air pollution. And I mentioned, that obviously Sadiq wanted to make sure that we were leading by example. So all 9,000 buses in London, the core bus fleet are now Euro 6, or in fact zero emission. I was up with him at Perivale launching the capital's or England's first, I think, hydrogen bus fleet, which is out, driving along. So if you're sort of travelling in Oxford Street around that area, you might see them. We have 500 zero emission buses. We've got more planned. We've got the largest zero emission bus fleet in Western Europe. We've got lots of zero emission taxis. We've got a third of, EV charging points now in the country, doing a lot there. And all of these things are driving down our air pollution. There's still more to do because we have the problem of PM 2.5, which is why we're arguing that government should put this on the face of the Environment Bill, because that's very pernicious, those very fine particles that come from wood burning, from construction machinery and so on. So we're asking government to do more about that and give us the powers, and local authority the powers to do the enforcement in those areas.
Thank you, that's really helpful. One of the parts of the action plan that Councillor Blackman's going to be talking about is how we enable others within the borough to go green as well. Mm-hmm. We're a borough that's made up of small to micro businesses that perhaps want to go green but are quite small. Are there GLA grants or support available to businesses to go green?
That's a fantastic question, and what people don't really understand is when they talk about London, you sort of think the City of London, big businesses, but actually 85% of our economy is small and medium enterprises. So and they are people that I know you're doing a fantastic job just trying to keep going through COVID and the economic impacts that's hit you. So it's a fantastic question that people want to go greener, and actually it's partly because customers want you to do that. So there is an economic benefit to doing that. So the Mayor has a sort of series of programmes and advice services. We have a London Business Hub that if we don't have that, I'll try and send you the details of the link to that, where there is advice on how you can go greener, the sorts of things you might do, but also just general advice really for businesses about how you might operate in the environment that we're in. There are some grants available through that programme. We also run for example, at the moment, just live is a programme that we're running with Re-London, which is a partnership between the Mayor of London and London's boroughs on waste management, and a project called Advanced London and another one called Better Futures. And they've got programmes of funding that are helping entrepreneurs, very small SMEs, on projects that will help them go develop new products, the sort of circular products. And try and help them to get to market, give them a business advice and so on. So again, have a look at our website, www.london.gov.uk/environment, or the Re-London website, and we can send you the links to that as well. Just for more information, just keep an eye out on that, because or sign up to our newsletters. There's often stuff coming through that will help lots of people, businesses, either with advice or support.
Thank you. That's really helpful, and I'm sure the team in the background is going to be digging out those email addresses and the websites, and we'll be putting them in the chat for everybody who's watching at home for us. I'm conscious of time, and I know that you've got other commitments as well tonight. So I just wanted to finish with perhaps one quick last question, if we're able to do that, if that's okay. Redbridge is currently expanding Fellock Waters and Hainault Country Park as huge sort of biodiversity projects. There's a lot of work happening in there. Is there anything that the GLA can do to help us promote that, or work in other local areas with how we can grow that piece of work?
No,
So,
absolutely. So the Grow Back Greener project is partly about smaller community projects, but we have other funding where we're supporting some of the bigger projects. So you may have heard about Beckenham Place Park and the Wild Swimming Lake. That was one of the projects that the Mayor helped support in Lewisham Council. We've been helping to plant new woodland in the green belt in a number of areas, in Enfield, for example. I was up at Ripple Greenway the other day, opening up a new project. So absolutely, and I think what we want to do is just understand what your plans are and see whether we can help. And as you say, it's not always funding, although obviously that helps, but we can help talk to government about are there sort of schemes that might help. We can help with promotion. Transport for London often talk about how do we get people, this is one of the big things about access. It's often people don't understand what's on their doorstep, and I know the pandemic has helped us to understand what's on our doorstep, but actually there are such beautiful places in London that we don't know about, that I've started to get to know about, that just understanding and promoting those. London is a national park city. We've been designated that the world's first, precisely because of the breadth and the range of amazing green spaces we have, and that we're trying to protect and improve. So again, do let us know, and then we'll see what we can do.
Thank you ever so much. That's been so helpful. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to help join us for this launch today and to share the information that's happening across London for our residents. I'm very conscious of your time and the fact that you need to escape by 6:30. I just wanted to open it up to Councillor Blackman and Councillor Athwell before you go, in case there's any other comments or questions that they might have after I've fielded the ones from the public. So Councillor Blackman and Councillor Athwell.
Thanks, Shirley. It was great to hear about the work that you've got underway, and I think the support from the Mayor and yourself is really crucial to so many London boroughs on this. So really grateful for that. I think my one request to you is whether you'll come and see us in person in Redbridge and meet some of the fantastic groups that we've got working on the ground, because as you know, we can only really deliver this by working with residents and businesses, and we'd love the opportunity to introduce you directly to those when we can.
No, absolutely love to. I think that one of the pleasures over the last few weeks has actually been able to get out the house and go on a couple of visits. So notwithstanding, all the restrictions and so on, would absolutely love to meet up with you and your residents and Jazz too.
Thank you, Shirley. And I think I'd like to very quickly extend the offer to Redbridge. So whilst you're still trying to get out the house, may Redbridge be one of your first ports of call.
Absolutely.
I think that I was looking at some of the questions, so I just want to encapsulate some of the questions in one question, which is really, I think funding has always been a real problem ever since I've become the leader of the council. The council has suffered sort of almost £200 million a year cut in its funding. But a lot of these projects are very, very important for the climate change emergency. And obviously they need seed funding and they need help. Whilst you guys have been great, I really hope that you consider when you do come out, we will show you ample projects, we've got teed up, but they just need the seed funding to get them going. Greenification of bridges, of roads, schools, green walls, all the things that can make our lives so much better. So yeah,
absolutely. And like, as I said, the Mayor has set aside some of this funding that we're rolling out over this year and the next few years. So we can definitely send you indeed the details of what's coming up. But we're working very closely with London councils as another way of promoting some of this. So just getting that information out to people, not just to the local authority, but to residents as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the session. Goodbye.
Great, thank you. Before I move on to our next speaker, which is Councillor Blackman, who's going to talk us through some of the action plan, I just wanted to reassure everybody at home, we can see that you've got a plethora of questions there. I can see they're coming in thick and fast. And so after we've heard from Councillor Blackman, we'll be working through those questions that are a bit more Redbridge specific, and the panel will be there to answer those questions. We also have some officers in the background who are trying to answer the more specific questions as we go along. So do look for replies to your questions questions in the chat as well. We're also posting links to anything that's being referred to. So if you want to find out more information, we are trying to give that to you as much as possible. But if there's anything we're missing, please just ask and we'll put those links in as we go. Okay, with that then, I would like to ask Councillor Blackman to come in and to give us a bit of an overview about addressing the climate emergency in Redbridge.
Thank you, Edith. Yeah, it's great to follow Jazz and Shirley, given their personal commitment to this issue. I'm going to talk through in a bit more detail some of the contents of the action plan and talk a bit more about what work we've got underway and what our plans are. This is something I've been personally very involved in since becoming a councillor a few years ago. I was involved in the tabling of the declaration on the climate emergency. Then I was a member of the corporate panel, and since earlier this year I've been the cabinet member. So it's been a really interesting journey for me to be on, and I feel really reassured that we've got such strong support from the leader, from councillors and from officers on this agenda, and I think in many ways it overlaps with so much that we want to achieve for the borough and the council as well. So it's really exciting time, I think, to be working on it. We have made progress, but for sure there is a lot more that we need to do, and we all need to do really to step up to the challenge of the climate emergency. So the action plan itself spans a period of 3 years and has over 114 actions across the themes of property, energy, transport, waste, procurement, and enabling others. So it's a really wide-ranging plan. And I think that's often the challenge with the climate issues, is they touch on so many different areas. It can be a challenge to cover them all and do them all justice in the short presentation we've got this evening, but we'll do our best. In terms of what we're doing with the plan, we're going to be reporting annually on the commitments in the action plan, and we're going to be reporting to one of the council's scrutiny committees. And the idea is that we'll carry on reviewing and updating it, so it doesn't stand still. And we've chosen the shorter time frame of 3 years really to try and galvanise action in the short term, and because we really know we can't afford to kick the can down the road. It also means we can revise it in 3 years and adapt as needed, and we're really conscious as an ever-changing external context, and so much is really dependent on government's regulatory framework and funding available, as well as technology. So it's a very fast evolving, and we hope we'll be able to respond to that as well. When we looked at the emissions across the borough as part of this work, it also became clear that actually in terms of the emissions the council's directly responsible for, that only constitutes 2.4% of borough-wide emissions. So that's why we're also really keen not just to look at those direct emissions, but also what the council can do in terms of its regulatory and strategic functions, as well as its role as a community leader, large-scale procurer, and social landlord to support this wider reduction in emissions across the borough. And of course we want to work with partner organisations, businesses and communities to do that. Can we have the next slide, please? So in terms of the breakdown of emissions, this was some of the early work that we did was to really have a look at where the emissions were coming from across the borough and from within the council. And it's clear from this pie chart that the overwhelming majority of emissions are from buildings. And in fact, we've got a statistic that in 2017, the total carbon emissions for Redbridge as a borough was equivalent to one person flying to Singapore and back 1,142 times. So as I said, the kind of overwhelming share of these emissions is from buildings. That includes residential, commercial, institutional and industrial. And of those, actually the biggest majority is from residential buildings, which is 75%, and commercial and business buildings at 25%. And the next biggest category after buildings is transport, and that's 36% of total emissions, of which 61% are from on-road transport. So that obviously makes transport a key sector for us to tackle. Can we move to the next slide? So after looking at the borough-wide emissions, we look more closely at what the emissions the council's directly responsible for, and that's what this bar chart here gives you an overview of. So we looked at both Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So That's what some of these bars represent here. So we can see the amount that's directly linked to council vehicles, refuse vehicles and fleet, and then to street lighting, the estate, vision buildings and housing and communal areas. And this helpfully also breaks down how much of that is down to fuel consumption versus electricity consumption. So that really helped to kind of guide what actions we thought were needed, and you know, and that's what we see in the action plan. Just in terms of where we're hoping to see the biggest reduction. So over the next 4 years, I think the biggest reduction, which is really quite significant, is we're hoping to see a 69% reduction in emissions arising from electricity consumed by street lighting and building. So that's going to be really significant. And then in terms of the reduction in fuel used by buildings and fleet, we're hoping to see a 4% reduction. And I think that shows, you know, that's some of these are harder to crack than others, and obviously, you know, we want a strategy for both the hard and the difficult ones. I think the other thing I'd point out on this slide is that the council's direct emissions total around 10,000 tonnes of carbon, whereas there's actually a much broader amount, actually 3 times the amount, are attributed to the services that we procure. And a similar amount are attributed to council tenants. So we really need to look at all those different emissions, not just our direct ones. Can we move to the next slide? So taking first of all property and energy, as we saw, this is buildings were the main source of emissions, and as the mayor said, we expect many of those buildings still to be in existence by 2030. So the real focus here is around improving energy efficiency. And also ensuring we have kind of more sources of green energy for the existing buildings we've got. As Jazz pointed out in his presentation, there's already work underway on this. We've got the Go Green grants, which are helping us improve the energy efficiency of buildings, and we're also planning quite a significant switch to a green energy tariff shortly. As well as that, we're looking at other things we can do in terms of retrofitting, working with private landlords, housing associations, and also requirements on developers in terms of new builds. And we're looking at what we can do in terms of other renewable energy sources on schools and across the Vision estate as well. Can we go to the next slide? So cleaner journeys, this is obviously the second largest category of emissions, and another key one for us to tackle. And what's really crucial, I think, is that we try and make that modal shift away from very sort of car reliant culture towards much more emphasis on walking and cycling. Of course, we recognise there are circumstances where people need to use their cars, and in that case, it's really trying to ensure that those are electric vehicles, and we can do that by upgrading our own fleet, which is underway, as well as making sure there's good infrastructure for other owners of electric vehicles across the borough. And we are rolling out a number of electric vehicle charging points across the borough as we speak, and we're hoping we've got more in the pipeline, and I think that's something that we'll all start to see as being much more commonplace as we walk around our local areas. I'm also pleased to announce that we currently have a consultation underway on around 10 kilometres of segregated bike lanes. So that's really exciting for us, I think, and hopefully is the start of many more of these across the borough. But I think is quite a significant development for us, and really hope we'll be able to move forward with that shortly. If we move to the next scheme, I'm not going into the detail on all of these because I think we'd be here all night, but I'm sure some of the questions will help us go into a bit more detail. In terms of waste, which was one of the other sources of emissions, as Jazz said, we've had a very successful transition to wheelie bins, which has seen an end to unlimited waste collection and is already resulting in significant decrease in the amount of waste that we're having to collect and an increase in recycling. I'm also pleased to announce this evening that after negotiation with our waste authority that we're part of, we will shortly be expanding the range of recyclers, so of items that people can leave out for recycling, and that will be expanded to include plastic pots, tubs and trays. We are tied into a waste contract for another 5 years, and which is the end of a 25-year contract. It's done a great job diverting waste from landfill, but we recognise it could be stronger on recycling and reuse. So we're really doing what we can within the remaining years, but actually also doing a lot of work to prepare the groundwork for a new contract. So I think we'll be seeing quite a lot of changes in coming years on that, as well as the national legislative framework develops with a number of interesting initiatives in the pipeline as well. And we'll be looking to do what we can to maximise reuse and recycling in the coming years as well. Can we have the next slide? So one of the final areas that we're talking about here is nature and the environment. And this is an issue that I know is really important to many residents, and often the most kind of visible manifestation of some of the environmental issues that we care about. Obviously, the green environment can really suffer from the effects of climate change, but is also really crucial to mitigating the effects and actually taking out some of those harmful emissions from the environment as well. So I'm really pleased that last night the Cabinet approved on behalf of the Council a new green urban landscape policy, which includes a number of commitments over actually the same time frame as this climate action plan, including 2,000 additional highways trees, and also a commitment to manage 25% of highway grass verges as grow zones, which will be managed to improve biodiversity. There's a lot more I can say on that, but I don't want us to be here all night, so we'll maybe move to the next slide. So as I said earlier, we're really committed to doing all we can as a council. However, our direct emissions are really only responsible for 2.4% of borough-wide emissions. So it's really the work with businesses, residents and community groups which are really going to be crucial to help us really shift the dial on that. And that's what we're really committed to do as well. What I'm really keen to do as well is hear from others this evening and other groups as well, separately from this evening, about how best we can take that engagement forward. And it's an active conversation that we're having at the moment as well. What we are committed to do is to help support the creation of hopefully a self-sustaining network, which will really help some of those groups already active across the borough, and hopefully new ones as well, to come together and share best practice and work together on delivering projects and identifying funding opportunities where they can as well. And we're really keen to sort of promote and facilitate that, but I don't think we necessarily need to be the one that will be leading that, because I think we very much want that to be led by community groups as well. And parallel to that, we have also developed an online information presence, which has local information for businesses and residents as well. And again, hopefully is another way for groups to connect with each other and share the information they're doing. And as I said, referred to a number of times during the presentation, that the national government legislative framework and landscape is really crucial to this, both in terms of setting the rules that we all need to follow, but also in terms of providing the funding that are really going to help us make a difference on this. So we're really committed to doing what we can to persuade the government to provide more funding and provide a more favourable legislative landscape to help us, but actually all councils across the country, to deliver on that. If we move to the final slide, Edith. Thank you. So really keen, like I say, to hear thoughts from those on the call about how they want to get involved. Up on the slide here are just 3 examples of some quite practical schemes that have been touched on already, where residents might want to get involved, including in terms of switching to renewable energy, joining the solar panel initiative that the Mayor's led, and also accessing the grants that we've made available to improve energy efficiency of homes. But like I said, really keen to hear more from the groups on this call about how they think we can work together. And I think this is very much the start of our journey and our work with everyone. So, it's a really exciting period, and look forward to doing more together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackman. I really appreciate that presentation. I'm really sorry to say that Ruth Musgrave from Transition Town Ilford has been having technological problems. We've been working in the background trying to get her online, and unfortunately we haven't been able to get her through yet. So I'd like to suggest that we open up the question and answer section to Councillor Blackman and Councillor Athwell at this stage. And if Ruth is able to get through, perhaps we can give her some time a bit further on in the event to talk a bit about the work that she's been doing. I have asked the team if they could post a link to Transition Town Ilford, so you can take a look to see a bit about some of the projects that Ruth was going to talk about, just in case she can't get on, and so that you won't miss out on that. It has been a busy chat function, and I have been busily scribbling away trying to collate these questions together into some semblance of sections so that I can present them to the panel in different ways. So I'm going to jump around a bit. We have got some questions around recycling. We've got some questions around pollution and the ultra low emission zones. There's some questions around paving over gardens, impacts on biodiversity, cycleways, and the Healthy Street Scorecard. And there's more things flooding in. So I suggest that we get started, and I'll ask Councillor Blackman and Councillor Athwell to come in on the questions as we go. I will be paraphrasing. If you feel that I haven't covered your question, please do resubmit or put something in the comments and we'll try and pick that up. So in terms of the recycling rates within the borough, there's been a few questions around the low levels of recycling and the different types of plastic recycling that we actually take, and some questions about how much actually gets recycled and how much ends up in landfill within Redbridge and the climate impacts that might have. Is there any ways that we can reduce that landfill and take action? For example, one of the questions has been about reducing waste collection to 2 weeks, which is what other boroughs have done as a way to sort of change habits. So there's a few questions mixed together there around recycling rates.
Sure. And shall I pick that up, Edith?
Yes, please.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting time in terms of waste and recycling. In terms of the current arrangements that Redbridge has, so I can assure all those on the call this evening that actually we do a really good job of diverting waste from landfill. That is one thing that the contract does do. So we divert, the figures I've got, which I'm sure are pretty up to date, are that we divert 99.98% of waste away from landfill. And in fact, that was one of the kind of key driving points for the contract when it was established nearly 20 years ago. So on that front, it does do very well. I think what it doesn't necessarily do so well is meet some of the kind of more contemporary expectations in terms of recycling rates, and that's something we've been working very hard with the Waste Authority to negotiate. And as I announced earlier, that's where we're pleased that we're shortly going to be able to collect an expanded range to include plastic pots, tubs, and trays. And I think it's no secret that the current range really lags behind what a lot of other boroughs are able to collect, and that is simply because we are tied into what is a 25-year contract. We're, as well as trying to negotiate to expand that range now, we're starting to lay the groundwork for the new contract as well. And there is in fact a draft waste strategy that was approved last night to go to consultation. So there will be an opportunity for residents to look at some of those plans and look at some of those priorities for the new contract and share with the Waste Authority that we're part of, along with another three boroughs, exactly what their priorities are for that waste contract. And we really hope it will enable us to drive up our recycling rates. What we have seen associated with the We Live In rollout is quite a significant increase in recycling rates, and that's because we've basically ended the unlimited collection of black bags and residual household waste. So it is through a lot of engagements with residents. We are seeing much better use of recycling facilities that are available, and we've also provided a huge amount more of the recycling boxes that are flying out of the door at the moment. So we know that we are seeing an increase in that. Were there other aspects on the waste point, Edith, that I needed to cover? Does that cover most of them?
No, I think the only other question that was asked that I don't know whether Councillor Athwell would want to come into was about the waste collection being changed to 2 weeks instead of 1 week, and whether that's something that the council has considered.
No, because I think a lot of our residents do want their waste picked up on a weekly basis, and I think I echo what Councillor Blackman's been saying, in the sense that the wheelie bin rollout has been so successful that we've seen a considerable lessening of the waste that we're picking up, and that's going in the right direction. And in terms of speeding up with the recycling, Joe's touched upon the fact that we are tied into long-term contracts. And until we come out of those contracts, that's when we can really start making those changes. And I can understand residents sort of wanting change a lot quicker, but we can only move as fast as we can, because trying to get out of a 25-year contract generally means you have to wait till the full 25 years are over. And as soon as we came out of that, we took our fleet in-house. Having taken it in-house, we've now introduced wheelie bins, and we will go further, but it's a staggered approach, and slowly we will get there. But I think I can reassure the residents that we've not talked about going from 1 week to 2 week, and I know vast majority of our residents want us to continue, but we have made significant gains just by going to wheelie bins. That's made us certainly a lot better in the league table in terms of the amount of waste that we put out into the wheelie bins. Thank you.
Could I add a point on food waste as well, actually, Edith, because I was staggered when I heard that 50% of the residual black bag waste we collect is food waste, and I think that really shows that there's a lot more we could be doing with residents to really encourage a reduction in the amount of food waste. I mean, I know there's also kind of pressure to move to food waste collections, but I think ultimately, you know, what we need to do is drive down the amount that we're throwing away. And if you think about the impact on you know, household budgets of throwing away 50%, you know, that volume of food every day and every week, you know, I think that's actually a nice example of where what's good for the climate, what's good for the environment is actually good for the economy and is good for residents, you know. So I think we're hoping to do a bit more you know, publicity and a bit more encouragement of residents to reduce food waste, which is such a sort of staggering waste on all fronts, and yeah, we're keen to do more on that if we can. But I see Ruth has joined, I think.
Great. Yes, and I was just going to say, great to see that Ruth's here. What I'm going to do, Ruth, is give yourself a breather. There's nothing more stressful than probably the last 50 minutes of your life. So trying to get on technology. So do take a breather. I promise we haven't forgotten you, and we'll just do a few more questions, let you catch your breath, and then we'll bring you in if that's okay, Ruth. So the next set of questions perhaps is about the modal shift into cycling, and the questions are comprehensive. Are there any comprehensive plans for segregated cycling? And in cycle pathways, who are you consulting and how? And then there were some additional questions around the frustrations around people parking on cycleways, and also how they're protected and how they're maintained. So I don't know whether Councillor Athwell, I want to bring you in first this time, just to split it up amongst the panel.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question, because as an avid cyclist, I want to complain to Councillor Blackman as well. I share the concerns of residents who, you know, we got cycling lanes and really needs to be more segregated. And I'm really excited that that Councillor Blackman is really moving towards having much more segregated cycle lanes. But what we have to also consider is we're coming out of a, you know, an international emergency, you know, which is here now, which is the pandemic. And of course, the economics of that means that it has set us back, certainly the last 18 months. And as not only that, it's probably set us back a lot more, because as businesses start to recover, we will certainly start to put more segregated cycle lanes out there. But it is absolutely frustrating that simply painting a cycle lane doesn't make it a cycle lane, because when cars park on it, then you're still having to go to the middle of the road. And in any case, if you do cycle in there, and as a cyclist, I'll speak, that you do end up with all the debris that's come from the main part of the road, and of course the the council's mechanical sort of sweepers can't get through there because there's cars parked there most of the time. So there are things, but I know Councillor Blackman is starting to go towards the segregated cycle lane. So hopefully, Joe, I've teed you up nicely for finishing off the answer to this question.
Thanks, Jazz. Yeah, it's yeah. I'm for sure I'm not as fast a cyclist as you are, Jazz, but I do get on my bike quite regularly. And for me, as maybe a less confident cyclist, segregated bike lanes are really important. So as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, just this week we've launched a consultation on around 10 kilometres of segregated bike lanes, and that's on Aldersbrook Road, Blakehall Road. I think it's Woodford High Road, Centre Road. So it's that end of the borough at the moment, which will kind of helpfully adjoin with some of the segregated bike lanes in place in Newham and Waltham Forest. And we hope is the start of many more of those. I think the point I'd add that is segregated bike lanes are really important on some of those main routes. I think on quieter, what's interesting is if we can make some of our back streets quieter, then we don't necessarily need segregated bike lanes through more residential areas, because then those roads become safer and easier for cyclists and pedestrians alike as well. But yeah, I really hope this is an area we can do more on. It is funding dependent. I mean, we are putting some of our own funding in, but we're also at the moment waiting to hear what TfL's settlement is with all the London boroughs. So, fingers crossed that we'll get some more from there in order to enable us to go further and faster on that agenda on our bikes, of course.
Thank you. I'm also supportive of that. Another cyclist in the borough as well. And when you've got a 3-year-old telling you to cycle faster in the background, anything that makes you feel safer is good. So another set of questions that we had was around the ultra low emission zone, specifically around people who live in that area, who are particularly concerned about air quality of monitoring and supports families in the area that may get dispersal of people that are parking and driving through areas outside of the ULEZ and maybe in more residential areas, which will obviously have a negative impact for them. Is there anything in terms of the work that the council is doing with the GLA to try and alleviate that for our residents, and how can we be supporting in that area?
I think the council certainly have been looking at and trying to get the controlled parking zones in most of the surrounding areas, which will help alleviate those concerns. So if there's a controlled parking zone, especially around the A406, then people wanting to leave their cars, well, they won't be able to because it's a controlled parking zone. So that is a direct benefit from having controlled parking zones. And of course, the price for a CPZ is £20 per annum, and having people not park on your street and being able to park there and not having to mess with the air quality or the lack of it that's going to come if people did, I think that's a positive step forward. I think what the mayor has done in terms of ULEZ has been very bold, because there's been a lot of opposition to it, but I think, as we all have to breathe the air. So just because just because we have vehicles which perhaps need to be upgraded, I think it was a very bold step. He was very brave, and I think it's all in terms of improving the quality of life that we have. And I think we should really applaud that and take that on board. And as we go forward, we will be looking at other incentives. But at the moment, CPZs are a massive sort of way forward. And I know in some parts of schools, we've looked at our school streets, again, the same thing, not being able to park in front of schools, meaning the schools will have better air quality and safer as well at the same time. There are other incentives which we can talk about, but those are the two that came to mind straight away, especially around the ULEZ boundary.
Thank you ever so much, Councillor Atherwell. That's really helpful, and I think that answers a number of the questions there. I'm conscious it's now 7 o'clock, so I'm going to bring Ruth in, who has had quite a stressful 50 minutes, I think. And we asked Ruth to come along to talk about some of the local work that she's been doing through Transition Town Ilford, and to give you a sense of where there are opportunities for you to get involved, and how and what support there is to help you as well. So Ruth, can I bring you in?
Thank you, and thanks so much to your very helpful technician who spent an hour trying to get me in as a speaker rather than as a participant. So thank you for inviting me to share our response from Transition Town Ilford to the Climate Change Action Plan. We're a diverse group of people who run events and activities in Ilford, which aim to build community and create a greener and more sustainable neighbourhood. We're one of the 300 plus transition groups in the UK Transition Network, and these are focused on action at neighbourhood rather than borough-wide level. Our current projects include the Forest Garden in Valentine's Park, a dry goods wholesale food co-op, a community energy group, a plastic-free Ilford campaign, and this week there are 2 plastic-free front garden tea parties to support that. Going on to support plastic-free July, and an edible front garden growing group, which was called Growing Food, Growing Friends. We previously run a regular green pop-up market and cafe, and hosted electrical repair workshops, run activities at events like Redbridge Green Fair. We hold an annual food festival on the Commonwealth Estate, and members are welcome to set up or join working groups based on their own interests. So if anyone listening is living in Ilford, we'd love you to get involved. But of course, we're not alone in taking action. There are other community groups in the borough like Cleaner, Greener Wanstead, which are just as passionate as we are about taking local action in response to the climate emergency. Redbridge Faith Forum is also encouraging faith communities to go green. This year, it's held network meetings to share what faith groups are doing in their own buildings to tackle the climate crisis. And its annual Interfaith Walk this September will be focused on water and the climate crisis. There are also a number of churches in the borough which are part of Eco Church, an award scheme to encourage churches to move to zero carbon footprint. So there are a lot of Redbridge citizens who are concerned about the climate crisis and are already involved in action. But now to the Climate Change Action Plan. In Transition Ilford, we welcome the plan and especially thank those councillors whose hard work and persistence made it happen, and officers. It's an achievement that the council now has some targets to work towards, and there are some positive proposals. At the same time, I think all of us, including, I guess, those who put the plan together, would acknowledge that it's only a start and that much, much more needs to be done with urgency. We recognise that there's a million pressures nudging for priority in the borough, but believe that there's none more urgent than the ecological crisis at this time, and as it impacts all areas of life in the borough. As we heard in previous talks, there's a health crisis. High air pollution is affecting children's health. There's a food crisis. In some parts of the borough, people don't have easy access to healthy, reasonably priced food coming from local farms. There's a safety crisis, adding another pressure to conflict which displace and traumatize people who then become refugees, and some of whom have made their home in Redbridge. It's a livelihood crisis. In the Punjab, farmers can no longer irrigate their crops because water's drying up. Rains are failing to come, so crops are ruined in Ghana. Hurricanes destroy homes and businesses in Barbados, just to name 3 places which matter to people I know who are living in Redbridge. So with COP26 coming up, we would urge the borough to move as fast and as far as you can with the plan. As I said, we appreciate the efforts of the councillors in setting up. And now we very much hope that the next step will be to educate and inspire those who work for the council so they can play their part in making it happen too. I was inspired by the example of St Mary the Virgin Church in Ilford, which has received the Silver Eco Church Award. In a talk the vicar gave recently, he said that they've decided to ask 2 questions about every decision they make. The questions are, will this decision help us to move towards zero carbon? And can we afford it? Now, they only go ahead with decisions when the answer to both of those questions is yes. This is the kind of commitment to climate action we'd love to see at all levels of the council, including from those who make seemingly small decisions like turning down thermostats in council buildings and turning off idling engines of school buses. This actually matters so much to me, as twice a day a council vehicle runs its engine outside our neighbour's house for 5 minutes while waiting to pick up a child. So making the climate emergency declaration in Redbridge was a very positive step. And sadly, the momentum has been interrupted by the coronavirus pandemic. And we understand the strain on budgets and the financial impact of that. To keep plans moving forward, a number of local authorities, including some London boroughs and the County of Essex, have set up climate commissions. These are borough-wide partnerships bringing together people from the public, private and civic sectors to work collaboratively with the local authority to help drive local climate action. They're unpaid, independent advisory groups. In Lincoln, for example, a climate commission has been set up between Lincoln Council, Lincoln Transition Town, local businesses and the university. There are many reasons why such partnerships make sense, not least because working together across sectors brings so much more knowledge and experience to the table. The voluntary and community sector can enthuse and engage people. It has the flexibility to try out creative ideas on a small scale. The business sector brings expertise in creating green jobs and managing projects. For example, it can identify green business opportunities in the energy efficiency, generation and retrofitting field. Universities can offer research input on plans and help to identify best practice. And of course, the local authority brings the structure and finance for wider initiatives, as well as links to regional and national government. Under the Enabling Others section of the Redbridge Climate Action Plan, there's a commitment to create a self-sustaining network with the voluntary and community sector by June 2022. That's great, and we look forward to that. At the same time, we would encourage the Council to consider immediately setting up some kind of climate commission, drawing on the expertise, energy and ideas which other sectors can give to add impetus to the plan. We would be very willing to be part of that. So to sum up, thank you for your plan. Move as urgently and as boldly as you can. Involve those who are already doing climate action on the ground in the community. And in this way, I believe Redbridge can move forward to becoming a flourishing and green borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today and to give the views of a local group that is working very hard on this project at the moment. That's really, really helpful. I'm just going to reiterate something that Councillor Blackman said about getting involved in local groups. And actually, Councillor Blackman, can I bring you in just to talk a bit about what we're planning and what we're thinking about launching in September, just to remind people?
Sure, and yeah, it's great that you're able to join us tonight, Ruth. I was really keen that you know to have a group like yours represented, so people can hear directly about the great work on the ground. I think it's the work you're doing in a very practical way. It's also the kind of leadership and education of the community that comes through your groups, and it's also the fact that we hope you'll keep us on our toes and make sure we deliver to everything in that action plan and more, and push us to go further, and certainly do communicate that to your local ward councillors as well. So yeah, what we're really keen to do is kind of harness a lot of this energy and enthusiasm and help it take us forward on this agenda. We've had one meeting, well, as part of the launch of this action plan already, with groups involved, and I think what we find is, as with today, there's such a wide breadth of issues in the climate action plan and that are linked to the climate that you can never do justice when you do just one meeting. So our initial idea is to do a whole series of sessions with activists and groups who want to join us, and to take each priority in turn from the action plan and really drill down a bit more on what more the council can be doing, how we're going to deliver, but also what local groups want to do and what support we can give them and how they can work together. So that way I hope we can kind of break it down and get into a bit more detail and really start delivering and start planning together. So yes, we hope to launch that series of those starting in September. We're very happy to do that on a, to have that led by residents and groups. So if you have ideas about the best way to organise that, and I think ultimately it doesn't have to be a council run forum either. It's really about how we can kind of facilitate and bring people together in that space as well. So yes, we hope to launch the first one of that series in September. We'd love to do some in person as well, pending restrictions and all of that. But I guess for in the short term, they're more likely to be virtual. Edith, did you want to add anything else on how people get involved?
That's great. Yeah, only to say what we have done is we've created just a short survey, so you can give us your name and your email and whether you represent a group or a business or whether you're a resident that just wants to get involved. And then we'll create a mailing list and we'll get in touch with people just to let them know about when the meeting's going to be and just try and find a date that works for everyone. So the team should be dropping that link into the chat now. So it's a 3-question question just to give us your details. So please do sign up and let us know and we'll be in touch. So that'd be great. Thank you. Also to say that I know there's a lot of questions, so we're going to power through now. And I'm going to paraphrase in a few occasions, so apologies about pulling things together. Jazz, there's a direct question for you about the Department of Transport for this week has made it clear that their funding for low traffic neighbourhoods distributed through TfL will not be made available to local authorities that changed or it says ripped out their planned LTNs. Therefore, where is the funding going to come from if we have low traffic neighbourhoods in the future?
Thank you. The low traffic neighbourhoods we had last year were funded as part of the recovery from the pandemic, and the requirements there were they had to be done in a stated time without proper consultation, and the government was very clear that you will have to have these down by the 1st of September or you're not going to get the funding. And of course there was an outcry because people hadn't been consulted properly, and what we promised is that in any future low traffic neighbourhoods, what we want to do is a full-scale consultation like we do for everything else. And certainly this is something we want to take forward. This won't be the only amount of funding coming forward, but there are other boroughs where they had the low traffic neighbourhoods, the planning, the consultation, and the pandemic funding came at the right time for them. For us, we hadn't done that, so it didn't come at the right time. But one commitment I do give everybody is that this is the way forward, but we've got to do it in the right manner with the right consultation, and we will do that as the time arrives. Thank you.
Thank you. Another big hitting question for the panel as well. Has Redbridge looked into declaring an ecological emergency? I don't know, Councillor Blackman, if you want to come in on that one.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because we in parallel to the work on the climate action, we also had the work underway on the green urban landscape policy and also work of the task and finish group on the environment. And for me, actually, they are really interlinked. And I totally think we probably could have had an action plan on the ecological emergency and the climate emergency and the biodiversity crisis, and it definitely could have covered those, as is it references some of the other initiatives that we're undertaking in relation to nature, and those are more developed in other documents like the green urban landscape policy I referred to, and also in the work of the task and finish group on nature and the environment, which is due to report shortly to cabinet. So I think don't be put off by the fact it's not in the title, or it may be not filled out in this document, because a lot of work is underway, and like I say, for me they're very closely linked, and they totally both priorities for the council's work at the moment.
Thank you very much. I'm just working my way down the questions. I can see that we've got a young resident in Aya that put in a couple of questions for Shirley Rodriguez. I just wanted to reassure that we'll take those questions and we'll share them with her. I can see that they came in just as she was about to go. So apologies that we didn't get to those questions in time, but I can see that the team are picking up with you, and we'll ensure that those questions get across to Shirley for you. It's really important to us that all our voices are heard within this borough, and especially it's great to hear see a young person coming along to these events. There's been a few questions with regards to paving over gardens and the impact that that has on biodiversity in terms of having paved front gardens for cars and that sort of things, and what are we doing to try and discourage that behaviour and encourage people to be thinking about the climate in that area. I'm not sure who in the panel would like to start.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, go for it, Jo.
Yeah.
Go on.
Apologies.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? I think for me, we've learnt a huge amount about biodiversity and the importance of greenery over recent years, and you know, I think, you know, it's some of the paving over of driveways is maybe you know, is maybe came around a sort of different time, you know, before we realised really the value of biodiversity and greenery to the scale we do now, and also the impact that it can have on flooding as well when they're not permeable surfaces. There's obviously sort of different processes associated with that. Where the council can get involved is where residents are requesting a drop curb, because that effectively is what is the bit that we need to do, because that's on the pavement. That's where we need to come along and do that piece of work for them. And when we get a request like that, we assess it in various ways. First of all, if there's any grass verge or tree in the way or shrub, then we tend to refuse that application, because we value those natural aspects, you know, and we don't want to lose the ones that we have left. Where that's not in the way and there's no other reason not to approve it, what we do require is that it should be a porous surface, so it should absorb water, or it should have drainage included, and that's because we totally, you know, recognise the impact that it can have on flood risk, you know, when the water runs off, because there's nothing absorbent on there. Obviously, in some conservation areas, you know, you will have to apply for planning permission to change your front driveway as well. But you know, it's not always easy. I know it's very easy for people to say they don't want anyone's front driveway to be paved over, but it's when you look at this on a case-by-case basis, you know, it's often really important for people to get access to their house. You know, if they've got mobility problems, if they've got young children. We're also seeing additional requests because people want to charge their electric vehicles, which on the one hand is really good for the environment. So I don't want to pretend that these are always like easy choices for the council nor for residents, because they can be complex really, and you know, we want to do what we can to help by, like I say, enforcing the rules when it comes to greenery on the pavement, by providing electric vehicle charging infrastructure near people's houses so they don't feel the same you know, need to pave over, and by promoting the provision of that charging infrastructure. Also by as Jazz said, by introducing some controlled parking zones, so hopefully to ease some of that pressure on parking, so people don't feel like the only thing they can do is pave over their front driveway. And also I think like events like this evening and supporting the work of groups like Ruth's is really to sort of promote the value of green space and really have people kind of think again, where they might have once seen messy front garden, they'll see amazing haven for bees and butterflies and birds, and fantastic for reducing flood risk, you know. And I think it's that change in perception which is happening, maybe not happening fast enough, but I think that's going to be really crucial as well. So sorry, that was a long answer, but it's, you know, it's a complex question.
Thank you very much. The next question is about the ambition. Can we be more ambitious? Treat the emergency like we did COVID. Many more people will die from the climate health emergency. EVs are only a small benefit. So sorry, electric vehicles. Cycling and active travelling is much more beneficial. Can we make it really hard for people to drive? How can we be more ambitious in this agenda? Do we have any views on the level of ambition? Who'd like to come in?
I think the ambition is always there, but we have to actually look at the resident behaviour. We have to look at the wider policies coming from national government. This is a process and ongoing. What we have to do is get the low-hanging fruit quickly, and that's what we're doing. And as we go after that, these policies will come in over time, but we can't bring them all in overnight. And I think that's what we've got to concentrate on. The things that is going to have immediate impact, things we can do very easily with very little cost, bring them in straight away. Next comes some of the real big things. And of course, as we move down that agenda, all these policies will come into play. So this is a moving target, and we will get there, and we'll get there quickly. But we have to take it one at a time as well.
Thank you. The next question is, how is the borough putting pressure on central government for taking more accountability on emissions, such as blocking imports from countries that are actively destroying ecosystems, such as Brazil in destroying the Amazon rainforest for meat and soy production? So sort of a lobbying question. What are we doing in Redbridge to try and challenge that on a wider scale?
Thank you. I think in terms of lobbying, this comes through London councils, because the problem is that we are one of 32 London boroughs, and the real difference is going to make it is when all 32 plus the city come in together. And of course, there's a lot of constituencies in there as well, and a lot of MPs of all political colours. And once you get that kind of support behind you, so this is not a Redbridge question, this is a London question. And I know that certainly talking with my London Council leader colleagues from all political parties, this is one of the things that we do talk about, and is something being pushed hard onto the government's through the government's letterbox.
Thank you. There's a question that is specifically about the Western Gateway, but I'd like to broaden that out, if I may, for the panel. So this is asking about how is the council, what is the council doing to require ambitious new developments, such as the Western Gateway, to take account of the climate emergency? So several tall buildings are proposed. Will these be built to standards requiring sustainable construction and minimal energy usage for residents? So I think if we can broaden that out to all of our regeneration and our planning ambitions, that might be really helpful to just recap that from the action plan. Should I bring Councillor Blackman in first on that one?
I was going to say, I was going to jump in and say that the Western Gateway project, please do look at all the appendices, the documents that have been published along this in the last couple of cabinet meetings. It's a really ambitious programme where we are looking at using state-of-the-art sort of development, state-of-the-art equipment and all the materials, to making sure that when we finish with something, it is actually something that's going to be sustainable over generations to come. Not only that, I know that Joe has been on walkabouts, because we've got very close to, well, running through Ilford is river roading in pathways, trying to link Ilford to Wanstead Park and Ilford to Barking. All sorts of plans are being looked at, and in a wider development scale, certainly through Ilford, one of the key things that we're demanding is that it's sustainable. And if you look at the planning application that came in a while ago, a couple of months ago, which was the Tesco's one, and they got pocket parks and a lot of green walls in there, to making sure, and being 100% electric, so nothing on there is going to be adding anything onto the into the environment. And so those are sort of kind of developments we're really encouraging. Look, we are open for business, but you're going to have to actually A, look at the quality of what you produce, and B, is it sustainable? So these are all matters that are being taken into account, because we're going to have to breathe that air. And you know, there's no point, you know, turning away from that. This is something, this is our opportunity to shape the future, and we certainly will, and we're doing it.
Thank you ever so much. Next question is around environmental education in primary and secondary schools in Redbridge after a child grows up and applying to life to learn. So what are we doing in terms of environmental education? Not only, I mean, this is specifically about schools, but also are we doing more to widen the knowledge of all of our residents on the climate crisis and the impact that their lifestyle has?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that does come up quite often. So there's a really good scheme called Eco Schools, which is a kind of internationally accredited scheme and set of standards that schools can work towards, and that's actively promoted by our officers when they go into schools. I don't know, Edith, whether you have the numbers for the schools that are involved. I think it's something like 80 or 90 schools across the borough that have some form of eco school status. And obviously we're actively promoting that. There's also a TfL run scheme called STARS, which is all about active travel and road safety and how to cycle safely. And that again is quite popular with schools. And whenever we go and talk to a school, as I've been doing quite recently over the last few weeks about the issues with dangerous driving around their schools, we always check in that they're undertaking the STARS programme. And we've also got quite a few cycle training schemes that we do with schools. So there's quite a lot going on in the schools area, which I agree. I think the issue of educating the public, I think, is a really interesting one. I don't think it's necessary for us to educate the public as such. I think it's about how we can sort of build awareness and how we can bring the public involved, and how through groups like Ruth's, you know, they can really see the value that they get out of improving their local area in a very personal way, you know, that they meet other volunteers, that they feel it's a good use of their time, and gradually sort of change that perception of you know what, you know, of understanding of green space. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to do in that area.
Great. And if I may, I might just do a quick plug. We have created a space on the website, on the council website, where we're trying to collect a resource of all of that kind of information together. If you are a local group and you would like to advertise on that website, we're trying to promote all of the local green groups that we've got, so that people can find one that is close to where they live and they can take part in that as well, as a way to help educate people, as Councillor Blackman has said, in terms of getting involved and learning that way. So please do take a look at our website, where we have tried to put a few of those things together. I'm really conscious of time and there's still a lot more questions to get through, so I'm going to cluster a few things together. There has been a few questions that came in succession around biodiversity linking to the green spaces in some areas, leaving areas wilder and longer, and there's been some concerns that there's implications of cutting those down, and that some have been left to grow but are still getting cut back, and what implications that has on biodiversity, and what are approaches, I suppose, in that. There's been a specific question around a removal of an English oak tree, and there's a planning application for that. I can see that that's been responded to directly by the moderator. So I'm going to stick to the broader question in terms of the kind of our approach to grass verges, to trying to keep things long and leafy to allow biodiversity to thrive. Could you just give us an overview about what the approach is in that way?
Yeah, shall I respond on the mowing regime, Jazz? So yeah, this is very much kind of in line with the policy we adopted last night on green urban landscape. So what I'd say, the majority of the grass verges in the borough are mown 8 times a year. That does mean you get a kind of several weeks between mows. I mean, what we've seen has been lots of sun, lots of rain, lots of sun, lots of rain. So it's been fantastic for growing, and it has been great to see the biodiversity in some of those verges. A lot of them are well overdue a cut now, but obviously that time they've had has still been great for biodiversity, and is reduced from maybe what it had been in the past. So far, we have about 10% of our verges that are managed for biodiversity, so they're grown as grow zones, and they only get mowed twice a year. So they still need to be cut, because you know you can't just leave them to grow and grow forever, because they'll just collapse and won't be quite so good for biodiversity. So those will still be cut. It doesn't mean we've given up on them. It doesn't mean they're not being managed for biodiversity. They just do need to be cut. Within the green urban landscape policy we approved last night, the idea is within 3 years we'll have 25% of our grass verges that are managed for biodiversity. So they will be left longer, but they will still be cut twice a year. And what I'm really keen to do is make sure that we've got really good signage and information for residents so that they understand the different management regimes of it, because I think there are misunderstandings out there about that. But yeah, it's been fantastic to see everything grow recently, and the, you know, to look at grass verges full of wildflowers and bees and other pollinators, and then obviously birds. It's really lovely, and any support that you know, to help us to do that in more places is much appreciated.
Thank you. Sorry, I was scanning the last of the questions, trying to find us a concluding question to come through. I can see there's a lot of comment and a lot of chat, and I'm very sorry that we've come to the end of our time now. An hour and a half has just flown by, and I can see that everything's thriving. What I would say is please do stay in touch. Please do keep involved with our green network that Councillor Blackman's talked about. There's clearly more to do. There's more time and more effort that we need to spend talking about this issue and to make sure that we're working together to address it. I think that I might stop there and ask if Councillor Athwell and Councillor Blackman would like to just sum up with any final comments, as we've reached the end of our time at this point. So Councillor Blackman, should I bring you in first and then Councillor Athwell to close? Yeah,
I'll let Jazz have the last word. Yeah, just to say, I think what I'm always impressed by whenever we do one of these events, or whenever we talk to people about climate, is the range of questions, the range of people involved, the enthusiasm, and the real commitment that we've got across the borough, really. So I just want to encourage everyone to stay in touch with us, to join this series of events we've got planned, to do what you can in your local community, to write to your local councillors, you know, write to Jazz and I about this, and help us kind of really kind of lead the way on this and deliver that change that's needed.
Thank you. And all I would like to add is to just thank everybody for joining us today. And a special thanks really to our keynote speaker, Deputy Mayor Shirley Rodriguez, who spoke so passionately on the issue. Climate change is true, and the challenge is the challenge of our lifetime. And as a council, we're committed to rising to that particular challenge and meeting it head on. In Councillor Blackman, I have somebody who's really passionate, committed, and taking everything forward. And as you've heard, we've already have projects underway and a plan for the future. What we really need, though, is you. Please get involved and join us on this journey. This journey is so important to all of us. Join our sort of our green network. Get involved with us, Solar Together. Apply for our Go Green grants. Together we can make a real difference, improving life in Redbridge today and for generations to come. Thank you for joining us today, and have a safe evening.
Thank you to everyone on the panel. Good night.